really tired of shame holding me down. I'm really tired of shame holding me back. Like, if I'm worth saving, I need you to do something because I can't do it by myself. I didn't understand what was wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me because he decided to marry somebody else. My name is Samantha Bucher. I am 29 years old, and I am the oldest of 6 kids. I grew up in a really fun, loud, always exciting environment. I have great parents who always encourage me to follow my dreams and always push me to be a better person. I always wanted to do good things because then I would get approval and get noticed and rewarded. And so I think now that I'm older, at a younger age, I started to tie my value to my achievements and the things that I did. In middle school and high school, I had a lot of friends. I was always nice to everybody, and I tried to fit in all the time, and sometimes that meant maybe taking a little too much crap from people, kind of being pushed around more than I probably should have, but that want to fit in kind of like superseded or outweighed maybe the things that I knew I deserved. Growing up in church and always being a people pleaser and wanting to do good and be a good person, I held my morals so tightly, and I thought that, as I grew up, that was just, compromising on certain things was just never going to happen. I would never not wait until marriage, and I would never, party, and I would never do all these things just because I didn't really grow up even in the temptation of that. And so I think maybe that had something to do with it, but I was also pretty just strong-willed, and I did care about what people thought, but not to the extent where it meant compromising aspects of myself in my church area of my life, my morals. When I graduated high school, I was still really involved in church and worship team, and I had this really great group of friends, and we would meet and study the Bible together, and it was super awesome. And I had started dating this guy, and things were pretty rocky, but before I even started dating him, I had prayed and asked God, is this a relationship you want me to pursue? And I kind of felt like it was okay to pursue and to go down that road. We ended up talking really seriously at one point about getting married, and because of his past, he wasn't sure if he would be able to make that commitment again. So we decided to take a break, and I told him he needed to come to the conclusion on his own whether or not he could be married again, and that was that. We took a break. The waiting period was very hard at times, and I remember at one point we weren't talking or anything, and I had asked God, I'm like, okay, this feels like a really long time to be waiting for a guy who I don't really know what he's going to choose. And so I said, okay, God, do you want me to continue to wait for this man? I opened up my devotion the next day, and I felt like it was the first time I had really heard God super clearly and super specifically for me personally. And the Bible verse in the devotion was 1 Corinthians 13:7, which is, love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures every circumstance. So I felt that was pretty clear, so I continued to wait. And after 6 months had gone by, Throughout that time, every time I would struggle, I would go, okay, God, like, what am I supposed to be doing? And word for word, he would answer me, and it was always, press on, wait for my promises, love never gives up. So that's what I did. And I just took that time to grow as a person and grow in my relationship with God, and I wouldn't change anything because I felt in that time is when I really, started to grow in my beliefs and really grow in depth in a relationship with God. And was probably the best point at that point between me and God in our relationship in my life. And then I found out from somebody that he was engaged, and 2 weeks later he was married to somebody else, 6 months after we had taken a break. And so I remember on the night of his wedding, I remember sitting alone in my room just crying because I didn't understand what was wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me because he decided to marry somebody else. And I remember now looking back, the moment when that thought came into my head, and at the time when you're hurt and I've heard it said, somebody told me once, that when your heart is open, that the devil tries to come in and shove whatever he can into that open wound so it becomes part of you. And hindsight, looking back, that just makes sense, because in that moment I was vulnerable and the devil totally preyed on my weakness, and he picked the thing that I think myself and a lot of people hold valuable as our worth, and he took my worth and threw it into question. And the lie that I know he spoke to me in that moment was, there must be something wrong with you because, see, he chose somebody else. And the other one was that no one's going to love you like he did, which is just ridiculous. But again, I was just in a place of hopeless despair, and those lies made sense because I could see what was happening in front of me, and it seemed like it was true. And so that was the point where things just started to go downhill. And so I started talking to somebody else, and I thought, this is great, I explained to the person, I'm waiting until marriage, blah, 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 and he was all on board with that, and then he ended up taking a job and moving across the country. So, yet again, the devil comes in. See, he chose somebody else. And that's one thing I've noticed, is that when you're down, the devil just piles it on and on and on and tries to just push you further and further away from God. I ended up just dating a lot, and then I met this guy who I totally realize now that, on the other side, I settled. But I remember at one point in our relationship, I knew his home life wasn't so great, and I remember, some of the things that he would say to me were just totally not okay. And I remember at one point in our relationship, he kind of snapped at one of my family members, and that was kind of the final straw for me when I went, it's okay for you to talk to me like that, but you can't talk to my family like that, which is totally not true. Hindsight, I'm I can't believe that I was in that place where I felt like taking any kind of verbal abuse was okay. But when the devil had me so far down, that I just thought that that's what I deserved, I remember thinking, you better hold on to this one because nobody else is going to come along and choose to stay with you. Because before that, the two people I had talked to both left. So I remember, putting up with things because I just needed so badly to be loved, or what I thought was loved. And so I compromised on things, I ended up sleeping with him, and I remember afterwards thinking, I can't believe how much you don't understand that was a big deal to me. And I remember thinking he didn't respect that like he should have, But that still wasn't enough to make me leave, because I still was just trying to fill the hole with anything to make me feel like I was valuable. And I remember thinking, I used to wear a purity ring, and I remember going home that night and taking it off and putting it in my drawer and just being like, well, I can never wear that again because I'm damaged goods now. And sharing that was the scariest part about sharing my story with people, because for so long I've let shame dictate the things that I share and the things that I hid, So after this guy and I ended up breaking up, I still continued to keep dating people. I was just searching for belonging in all the wrong places and wanting to feel loved in all the wrong people. I was working in an environment that was completely toxic. I was just trying to fit in and feel like I was valued, and I would go out with my coworkers and friends, and we'd go to the bar at night and we'd party, and then we'd go home and go to sleep and wake up and go to work the next day and do the same thing over and over. And I remember just seeing myself decline and go down this path that I knew I didn't want to be going down, but at the same time I felt some kind of belonging in that crowd, because I fit in for the first time, or what I felt like I fit in, and it wasn't good. I saw myself going down this path and I didn't want to be there anymore. And I remember at one point saying to God, I want to change, and I don't want to be doing this because I see the path of destruction that I'm on, but I can't get myself off of it, so I need your help. If I'm worth saving, I need you to do something, because I can't do it by myself. And, I can't just quit my job because I have responsibilities. And, I have a mortgage. I'm buying a house for the first time, and I can't just leave. And so on a fluke thing one day, I went to work and they fired me. And I was just gutted. I remember just being like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do, And so I cried my whole way home, and I walked into my parents' house, and my dad took one look at me and he goes, what is going on? And I just lost it. I just started sobbing. I was like, Dad, I got fired. I don't know what to do. I just felt like I was alone in this vast darkness. And there was just nothing left. There was no hope. And my dad in that moment said to me, when I told him I got fired, he said, oh, it sounds like God's pulling you out of a situation He doesn't want you in anymore. And at that moment, I felt like somebody had ripped the curtains open and saw me for the first time in probably a year and said, you are worth saving. And from then on, I got a different job. The environment wasn't a whole lot better, but I was doing better. It wasn't just all of a sudden something switched and, everything was just totally fine, and I was back to my old happy self, It took me some time and discipline with God to work through things and break habits and break patterns. And I remember, as I started to get involved in church again, I started to really understand and realize my worth and my value. But it was a struggle for years. It was still really hard for me to not associate my works and the things that I had done with my value. I remember, I was at a Bethel concert one night, and I asked a question, and they said, your identity should always be rooted in who God says you are. I think a big part of my growth and the shift of me really starting to understand who I was in joy class. And we were doing an exercise where we were supposed to go back to a moment when we felt alone and we felt like God wasn't with us. And we were supposed to go back to that place and ask God, where were you in all this? And immediately God took me back to a few places, and I thought, there's no way I'm going there with this group because I can't talk about that. And it was at that moment that I realized that shame still really did have a hold on me. And a couple months before, John had actually come up to me at church and said, I think there's some areas where you still have some hurt from guys. And at that point, I was, this was like last year. Last April, I think. I had thought, I'm pretty good with this. I'm good. I worked through a lot of this with God. I've really grown in my relationship. I've really been spending more time with him and reading the word and understanding that my worth is based on who he says I am and not anything else. But because I trust John, I kind of held on to that and said, okay, God, if you want me to go here, then I'm open. So that night in joy class, then when God brought those moments to my mind, I thought, okay, you've already told me once through somebody else that I still have more stuff to unpack. And now you're bringing these up again, so I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to trust you, but I'm not doing that in this group. I need to do this in a group where I feel safe, where I know that when I share the ugly things of my life, that I'm not going to be judged for who I am or who I was. And I think that that's a big tactic that the devil uses to keep people from fully recovering from traumas and hurts that we have in our past, is the shame and the guilt that he ties to those things, and the lie that he tells you that if you tell people these things, people are going to look at you differently. They're going to judge you. They're going to see you as damaged and dirty and a screw up or whatever you want to call it. So I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to go to these places, but I'm going to go there with people who I know are safe. And so I did. I took it to my friends and I said, look, I'm just going to tell you everything. And I'm just going to lay it all out there because I'm really tired of shame holding me down. I'm really tired of shame holding me back and keeping me stuck. I don't care about these things anymore. And I don't want to care about them. And I really think that me saying them to you is going to help them lose their power and their grip over me. And I want to go back to these moments with God and say, where were you in this? Why did I feel so alone? And so the moment that I went back to was that moment when I was sitting on my bed when I found out my ex was engaged. And I felt like the devil spoke to me, there must be something wrong with you because he chose somebody else. And in that moment, one of my friends, she was like, I did some praying about this, and I really feel like God gave me a picture of that moment for you, what it is now. And she said, in that moment, I can see you sitting on your bed all by yourself, just crying and taking these things on that the devil is feeding you. But the new thing that I think is I see you sitting on your bed, and when the devil tries to whisper that in your ear, God comes in and goes, that's not true. I chose her. I choose her. I want to be with her. And so now when I think about it, I don't feel the same hurt that I did before. Now when I think about it, I just feel so incredibly loved, which is the complete opposite of what I initially felt at that moment. I just want to encourage you. I think if there's things, the things that I want you to take away from this, of me sharing my story, is one, that you're not damaged goods because of things that you've done in your past. The things that you've done, the things that you haven't done, the things that you will do and won't do will never define your worth. The only thing that will ever define your worth is the fact that God loves you and he cares about you, and that's the only thing that matters. The other thing that I hope that you take away from this is that while being vulnerable is scary, sometimes it is, not sometimes, it is very necessary to move on fully from things in our past. So I want to encourage you that if you're feeling stuck and you're just okay, or you think you're good, to really ask God, is there something that I still need to work through? Or if you already know that there's something you need to work through, then I encourage you to reach out to somebody in leadership at church. Reach out to me. You can message our Facebook page, or go up to a leader at church, and I guarantee you they'll be more than willing to help you and pray with you. And if they don't feel like they're the person to maybe that can help you the best, then they will connect you with somebody who can. But I think that's one of the things for sure that I want you to understand is, like, it's okay to take the risk and open up to somebody, because the wholeness and happiness on the other side is so worth it. My name is Samantha Bucher, and I belong to Christ.